Boker Tov. Today is the first day of Tishri 1. Today is the day of the Feast of Trumpets, Yom Teruah, and it's an exciting day of salvation. It's an exciting day of blowing the trumpets, but it's also a day of preparing for battle. The purpose of the festivals, I just wanted to cover that, is basically it's a backbone of salvation. All the festivals, there are 7 festivals plus the Shabbat, which ties in all the festivals. It shows that we belong to the family of Elohim, and by how we treat others. And this is what salvation is so that we can actually belong to a family together. And to really understand how we got there is to understand what the festivals are all about. It's the backbone of salvation. It describes everything Messiah has done and will do. It's a day today to have fun and fellowship with like-minded neighbors and believers. Why? Because we have in common the love of Messiah that has been spread abroad in our hearts. This message is unique because, I just wanted to share my heart concerning, once again, about when Messiah came, that he did not get rid of what was written beforehand. He only came to amplify it. And the goodness in people is only effective as long as they have the will to suppress their selfishness. That's a very powerful statement. As long as the people are able to suppress their self-centeredness, can they act good. But we can only keep the lid on selfishness until at some point, some trial, some test, some temptation, some affliction will cause it to overflow, bust the lid off, and then what we are truly on the inside comes out. Once we have allowed our goodness to be overcome because our selfishness has risen higher, then we have broken the law. One who has sinned once is guilty of breaking the entire law. That's Yaakov, that's James chapter 2, verse 10. For whosoever shall keep the whole law, or Torah, and yet offend in one point, he is guilty of all. So I want to read a few chapters. I'm sorry, I scared you there for a second. A few verses concerning what love really is, and how love and how the fulfillment of that within us is basically the fulfillment of the instructions of what we were commanded to do. So let me jump right into this because this is exciting. It's a kind of a new revelation for me and understanding because of my really recent deliverance, praise Father, in some areas of my life. Excuse me. Romans 13, 8 through 10. It says that, owe no one any matter except to love one another. For he who loves another has filled the Torah, or the law. For this, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not murder, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness, you shall not covet. And if there is any other command, it is summed up in this word: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Love does no evil to a neighbor. Therefore, love is completion of the Torah, or the law. Matthew 7:12. Therefore, all things whatsoever ye would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them. For this is the law and the prophets. Galatians 5:14. For all the laws fulfilled in one word, even in this: thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Jumping back into the, quote, Old Testament, Leviticus 19:18, You shall not take vengeance nor bear any grudge against the sons of your people, but you shall love your neighbor as yourself. I am the Lord, or I am Yahuwah. You know, Father Elohim, Father Yahuwah, he wants a family where his children love each other. What parent doesn't want that? Because true love is completely and 100% void of self. It thinks nothing of itself. Father cannot pour himself into a vessel that has not been emptied of self. And without instructions on how to empty self, we will not empty ourselves. In fact, we can never empty ourselves enough for that. So the Spirit had to come because Messiah came and he sent his Spirit, sending him to do it for us. The more we listen to him, the Spirit, because he brings and he recalls back what Messiah said, the less we listen to ourselves and the more we are apt to obey because we no longer think that our way is best. This is exciting because, we are a vessel, and if we don't empty ourselves, he can't pour into us, which I will cover a little bit later on. How do we empty ourselves? We have to have instructions on how to do that. He can't just say, hey, go empty yourself so that I can fill you up. There has to be, well, how do I do that? How do I apply that in everyday life? And this is the reason why all the law is the Torah, basically. Law is a Roman word. The Torah is instructions. That's it. It's instructions on how to do something. That's your manual, your blueprint on how to live this life in accordance with how Father Elohim wants you to live it, not on how you want to live it. So, true love. What is true love? True love is an exchange. And this is what Father revealed to me the other day, and I want to share it because it's so exciting. Love is death of ourselves. No greater love than this, than man should lay down his life for his friend or his brother. Love is death of ourselves in order to impart life into another. Love is the death of ourselves so that we may impart life into another. The summation of the law is love. The summation of everything that he has told us to do, the outcome of all of that is so that we might love one another. Did Messiah come to just get rid of the instructions that teaches us how to love one another? I mean, what would that be? I'll cover this later, but, he's not going to tell us to do something without showing us how to do it. Just because we have the author of the book residing in us doesn't mean that we do not have to obey the words he wrote. Messiah, living in our hearts, does not substitute the requirement to obey his commandments. The 10 Commandments were further defined throughout the Torah. How we keep from coveting is defined more specifically elsewhere. So if you heard me just cough in, please forgive me. I thought I had it on pause. Jumping back into this, the 10 Commandments were further defined throughout the Torah. How we keep from coveting is defined more specifically elsewhere. Then Messiah came to define it more specifically. For example, like adultery, it says in the law, it says, do not commit adultery. But I tell you that if you look with lust in your eyes, and you've already done it in your heart, he came to make it and to show us that, look, it doesn't matter how good you think that you are, you're never going to be able to keep it without me. And Messiah came and to tell us that we can't keep his commandments without first losing our own righteousness in exchange for his. Then, once we are in a position that we know nothing we do is righteous, we can now accept his way on how to do his own instructions. And I'll repeat that. Once we are in a position that we know that nothing we do is righteous or can earn that, his righteousness, we can now accept his way on how to do his instructions. And that only comes by the Spirit of Yahuwah. And what I'm trying to say is that we can't love outside the love of Messiah. We can't love outside the love of Messiah that has been spread abroad in our hearts. How did he love? That's really what we need to come down to, is how did he show love? He followed his own instructions on how to love people. And he is the Word. He is the summation of what he spoke through Moses, through his servant Moses, the Torah, the law. He is the Word, it says in John 1. Let me kind of bring this back down to some understanding concerning even the dietary laws, for example. If we're always sick because we're not eating the right foods and we're always eating the wrong stuff, how can we get out in full health? How can we get out there and help our neighbor plow his field? How is that possible if we're not doing what we are supposed to be doing, because he created us and he already knows what's good for us? And if we act like and we look like the other nations, which the reason why he told us, basically you don't shape your beard so that it looks like the pagan nations. You don't cut yourself or put tattoos on your body because in honor of the dead like the nations do. He wants us to be, okay, if you're going to be part of my family, you're going to look like this. Be set apart as I am set apart. If we act like and we look like the other nations, what kind of identity do we have in the family of Elohim? Which gives us that desire to continue to look and act like him. Be set apart as he is set apart. That is both in the old and new covenants, which really it's just one covenant. It was enhanced because now the Spirit is written upon our hearts. Nothing has changed between them, only the manner in which we come before a righteous Father and to be able to stand in his presence unashamed. Let me dive a little bit further into this. Love is action. And if we do not have the instructions or the law or the Torah, whatever you want to call it, we don't have the instructions on how to act loving, we will never be able to. Because it's the Spirit in us that Messiah sent. Because that's what he said. He says, when I leave, I'm going to send the Spirit. He's going to remind you of everything that I've told you. For what purpose? So that we can follow his instructions. And if his instructions and what he said, they'd never deviated one bit. That's from the law, because that's why he dumbfounded the Pharisees over and over and over again, because he knew the law better than they did, because he's the author, or the Father's Spirit, but they're one. The Spirit is the breath of the Word, is what I'm trying to say, and it doesn't act. The Spirit does not act outside the boundaries of the Word. And what is the Word? Genesis to Revelation. That's your Bible. As parents, as good parents, are we just going to say, hey kids, just love one another? I mean, isn't that kind of what the world does? Is, hey, we're just supposed to love our brothers and just, be in harmony. But how do we do that? The ultimate goal of the parent is not only to tell our children to love one another, but to teach them how to do it. And how do we do that? By ourselves as parents showing in society and in public how we treat one another, as well as our spouses, and as well as our children. In a society, in a kingdom, can you imagine what it would be like even in this day and age now, can you imagine what it'd be like if people actually thought more of others than themselves? Um, how many, prisons would there be? How many, death sentences? How many of these would there be? It would be just as the kingdom will be when Messiah returns. We must give instructions on how to love, not just say, okay, love one another. John 14:23, Yahushua or Jesus replied, if anyone loves me, he will keep my word. My Father will love him, and we will come to him and make our home with him. Notice what he says. If anyone loves me, and you can also add in there, if anyone loves me, anyone loves his neighbor, basically, he will keep my word. Because when you love him truly, if you love Yahushua, you will keep his word. Therefore, you will be able to love others, is what I'm trying to say. So keeping his commandments, keeping his word, shows that we love him. And that spills over into our neighbors' lives. We are supposed to practice the law or practice the Torah, not to use it to judge others. And what I mean is, because if we do this, then we become law unto ourselves. If we judge others by the law, we become law unto ourselves, saying that we know better than the laws Elohim established on how to get along with each other. Are we to judge? You see, the first 10 commandments, or the 10 commandments, the first 4, show us how to love Father, show us how to love Elohim. The last 6 show us how to love one another. And quite interestingly, number 5, how we honor, respect our parents, which is the first commandment with a promise, links how we love horizontally with how we love vertically. And that's just a beautiful thing. James chapter 4 verse 11, or Yaakov chapter 4 verse 11, brothers, do not slander one another. Anyone who speaks against his brother or judges him speaks against the law and judges it. And if you judge the law, you are not a practitioner of the law, but a judge of it. Now notice he said, if you judge the law, which we're not supposed to do, then we are not a practitioner of the law, which is what we are supposed to do. We are supposed to practice what he spoke. And Messiah only spoke what he hears from his Father. And who gave the word? Who gave the instructions? Messiah, once again, spoke on behalf of his Father to Moses in the giving of the law, the Torah. Paul, or Shaul, still practiced the law. Example, when he shaved his head, to show that he was not, he didn't throw it out, basically, like most people believe that he did. It's because he knew that the law never went away, but only was made full in Messiah, who gave it to begin with. Get rid of the instructions of how to love, and you get rid of the author of those instructions. Therefore, getting rid of love. Living in a world of chaos. Think of what it was if you don't have any instruction. Even before the law came into practice, everybody basically became a law unto themselves. And there was nothing that was established. Death reigned up until, I believe it says Moses in Hebrews. I'm trying to remember the verse. Okay, that was Romans 5:14, excuse me. That can you imagine then when there's nothing that was laid down that everybody basically heard orally, and which if there's nothing that's laid down in writing, then anybody can interpret the oral commandments. So basically, even before then, there were no instructions that were written down. People just did what they felt like was right. And so, once again, getting rid of the instructions of how to love. In other words, saying that we don't have to follow the law because Messiah came to fulfill it. Basically, you're getting rid of the author of those instructions, therefore getting rid of love. You get rid of Messiah who gave the law to begin with, or the Torah, then you get rid of the author. And if you get rid of the author, he is our example of what love really is. Just because Messiah came and he said that, I came to fulfill Matthew 5:17, and that love is the summation of that, doesn't mean, yes, just because Messiah came does not mean that he got rid of, because he didn't come to destroy, but he came to fulfill. And what does this really mean? It means to fill up, okay? I mentioned earlier about the vessels. We're to empty ourselves. Summation, fulfillment, completion of all that really means is it is a result. You come to a conclusion, and it's like a math problem. The result of adding the figures, you get a result. And that's what he did. Messiah came and added all of these things. What to do when an ox or, an animal happens upon your land that is your neighbor's. All these little laws, like if you happen upon a mother bird with her eggs, you take the eggs and you leave the mother bird. He took all of his instructions, everything that he said, and he summed it up into one. The reason why I'm telling you these things is to love one another. But if you take away the figures, if you take away the instructions, you can't just have a result. Math doesn't work that way. You have to have the problem before you have the solution. And what he was trying to tell you and to tell us, is that love is the result of all the things I've told you to do. That is my goal, is for you to love one another. In other words, the fulfillment. He came to fulfill. He came to fill up the water glass. Okay? We can't do that without having a whole vessel to fill up. Only till Messiah came and sent his Spirit can we fill the glass in others. You see, we have to be filled with the living water before it can spill over into other containers, other vessels. He fills us up, we in turn fill others, they fill others, and so on. It's kind of like lighting candles. We have to light our light first, then we can light the lights and the candles of others, and it spreads. That is how it spread. But it begins with us. It begins with our flesh, and our flesh must die. It must be removed because it takes up, it's fat. It takes up a lot of room. Excuse me. It takes up a lot of space. And once that is dead, we have all this extra room. It's kind of like, in some ways, it's kind of like the spirits that are driven out of a man. He now has room to receive and to populate it and to fill it up with the word. And so with our flesh, we have to remove that so that we can be filled with that living water. And only by the Spirit can we be filled. Our flesh must die to make room, because it's either we walk by the flesh or we walk after the Spirit. But we can't do both. Leviticus, and once again, it says love your neighbor as yourself. That's in the Old Testament. He's not speaking anything new. When Messiah came, he didn't come to do a new thing. He came to drive us back to following his instructions with the tools to be able to follow them, which means that's the Spirit. Because first of all, we have to be made righteous by our belief in Messiah so that we can stand in the presence of Father. And once we have his presence, we're standing in the presence of Father. We can now receive his Spirit because he has a clean vessel to inhabit. And once we receive his Spirit, we go on and we can now overcome sin and put down our flesh. We're overflowing with joy and living water, and we're changing lives. When when Messiah said, or even what Paul said, for example, I didn't know, what covetousness was until I was told not to covet. So once we are brought aware of the fact, we have to do something about it. For example, as I mentioned earlier, what are these little instructions? We're so excited about, quote, being free from the law. Well, let's look at a couple of the things. Sorry, I was taking a pause there to look up. A lot of these are in Deuteronomy. If you go out there and look at some of these little things, if your ox or your sheep wanders upon your land, what do? You take it back to your neighbor. In other words, you're showing how not to covet. You're showing how not to be selfish. When you happen upon a mother bird who has her eggs, wouldn't you want your brother to just take the eggs and leave the mother bird? Because if the mother bird is left, she can lay more eggs, which means that's food for you. You're not taking more than what you're supposed to take. So I'm thankful that my brother left me food to eat. It's always good when you have leftovers, right? Okay. These are the things that, people just want a blanket statement. Hey, we're delivered from the law. Well, go back and look at what it is. We're delivered from having to do our own righteousness. And that, to me, is freedom. Freedom from the law is freedom from having to earn my own righteousness, which I would never be able to earn salvation to begin with. So, of course, I'm going to be, excited that I don't have to be under that, quote, bondage. Because all the law is, hey, this is what sin is. And without knowing what sin is, then we are damned, basically. And so it's by his mercy and his goodness that he gives us the instructions to follow. And I would hope that you would agree with that, because it's so powerful. People in this society, in this world that we live in, we must get along. There are laws in place to regulate, not regulate because each individual regulates their own behavior, but there are laws that if you fall outside the boundaries of the instructions, then there's punishment. And the purpose of the laws is to keep there from being chaos. What happens if you take away the law that says we have to stop at a red light? I don't have to say anymore. Complete chaos, complete destruction. Hey, don't steal. But don't tell them why or how not to. You see, we tell our children don't steal, but we have to explain the consequences of stealing. We have to explain who told them not to steal. We're supposed to love one another. Well, how do we do that without having the instructions? Father says the end result is of what I want and what I want my family to be like. And this is why he sent Messiah, because he says, look, you guys are not getting it. I gave you the 10 Commandments. You sinned. You built a golden calf. He says, obviously, that's not good enough. Let me give you more instructions, which most of the instructions that were given were for the priest on how to perform service to him in the temple. So there were very few laws that we, as the commoners, as the people, the tribes, really were responsible. And it's basically, how do we treat one another? And this is all Messiah was trying to say. That in all these different scenarios, that's why he was building these laws. There has to be, there's not a law for every scenario, because that would be crazy. That would be like billions of laws. But basically, he's trying to tell you that we as children, like lambs, we're dumb, we're stupid. We can't love without knowing how to love. And that's all he's trying to say, is the love, the fulfillment. And if you go back up to Romans or even Galatians 5:14, for all the law or the Torah is fulfilled. It's filled up It's completed. The result of it all is in one word or one command: love thy neighbor as thyself. And how do we do that? He's not going to tell us to do something that he not only first gives us instructions how to do it, but also to demonstrate as a good father, as a good savior, as a good shepherd, to demonstrate, this is the way, walk ye in it. I'm going to show you how to love one another. And you can't get rid of his good commandments, his good instructions, because if you do that, you're going to end up in chaos, and all you have is really legalism, because legalism in the bad sense, in the worldly sense, is just giving an instruction without telling us how to do it, and trying to earn and create ways to follow and try to do that instruction. See, what I'm trying to say is maybe that legalism wasn't a bad example. Was a bad example to use that. He's just saying love one another, but also this is how you do it. And so legalism basically is one being a student of wanting to follow the laws as they are written, period. It's not a negative thing. It's wanting to be obedient. And then also having the willingness to be teachable if I have misunderstood the law, if I have, taken it, and changed it to make it more convenient to myself. So with all of that said, true love isn't an exchange. Love basically is the death of ourselves in order to impart life into another. We would not know how to do that until Messiah actually came and died for us in order to impart life into us. Therefore, we have to die to ourselves. We have to die to our flesh in order to impart life into other people. We can't run away. We can't run from being vulnerable enough to help people in their time of need, or stand and work through a situation, but running away means that we take that life away from others. And we hold on to it because it's secure. We don't want to be hurt, because love invokes hurt feelings at times. And if we take that love and we run away, we try to save from being hurt. We try to save that life. We've basically lost our life, according to what the words of Messiah, that those that save their life shall lose it, but those who lose their life for my sake shall find it and shall save it. So today, on this Yom Teruah, this exciting day, just go out and study the Word and fill yourself up with the Word, because the more that you do that, the less selfish you're going to be, the less focused you're going to be on yourselves and more on others. And that's what it really comes down to, is we want to be filled up with the instructions, because why does it say in Psalm 1, it says, talking about meditating day and night on the law. Psalm 119, how many times does it talk about putting the law into us, putting the instructions? When David wrote that, he wasn't talking about the New Testament. He was talking about the Torah, the first 5 books, where the law of Moses is contained at. And if we don't know what the law is, how are we supposed to love one another if we don't know how? So joy and blessings to you. I'm excited, full of joy today, because Father is always working. He's always working things out for His good, His perfect will. And how do we know His perfect will? By not conforming to this world and being transformed by the renewing of your mind. Romans 12:2. We have to conform ourselves. We don't want to do it because we're dumb sheep. We want to venture out and do things on our own. But until we see that, hey, man, inside the boundaries, inside this sheep pen is so much better because I have food, I've got warmth, I've got security, I've got everything that I need. Until we find that, we're just going to be miserable because we're going to live a life on the run, a life full of chaos. Come back home this Yom Teruah. Come back home this fall festivals because Messiah is coming back home. He's coming back to the earth. He wants a people. He wants a family for his Father that will love him unashamedly, full of passion. And it begins with just giving a smile to that grocery clerk, or giving a smile to that post office worker, or giving a smile to the UPS driver, and just said, you know what? I really hope you have a blessed day today. Just love people. Because in doing so, it means that you have listened and to his instructions, Yahuwah's instructions, and you have followed them. And the result is far beyond, the reward is far beyond what you could ever have imagined, because no one knows the things that he has in store for those that love him, for those that keep his commandments. Blessings to each one of you in the mighty name of Yahushua.